mechanical principles of upsetting. Kind of touched on some of this in the basic mechanics. This is all about understanding how the energy transfers in. You're always going to be looking at how to maintain the material stability and drive that energy into the tip in the best manner possible. Whether you're striking in yourself this way, trying to get it to go in there, or you're coming from above and driving from above using the anvil as the absorber to push the material back in, it's kind of 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. It mostly comes down to whether you have a suitable size bar or not. You have to keep an awareness of what the material's doing. If you are starting to shift out of lineation and you're keeping hitting here, it's just going to keep shifting and shifting and shifting. It doesn't matter if you're on the press, if you're under the power hammer, it's going to still do exactly the same thing. If you go and watch a bunch of the videos of the folks out there on working on the power hammers, beautiful videos of like Farham doing hammers, he always comes in when he's trying to upset the material, breaks the corners on the top and bottom, and then starts driving. The reason being that he understands that if he doesn't, he can't center and control that material, right? You need to have a little bit of a dome there to be able to adjust it to get that energy to transfer in. So as we're upsetting ourselves by hand, we have to be aware of what is happening with that material as that face pushes in and making sure that we are transferring the material. So in the last one I talked about the little kind of creation of that pyramid on the top as you're pushing in, because what that will do, you'll drive that, it's a bit like putting that longer flat end point in. It helps center up the energy a bit and it stops that flaring out of the cheeks over here. And it's just kind of like I drive in on the tip, knock the corners as a clean up, drive in on the tip, maybe a little edge work, and you're driving that mass through this swath here. As soon as you start getting out over here, it's going to create more bend, force the thing out, vice versa in the other direction. Also remember, I'm turning the material. Every 2-3 hammer blows I turn it. Big one is understanding when to drive the material in. So, you know, you can get a really big flare like this, right? And that's great. But what are you trying to achieve? Are you trying to achieve a giant elephant foot? You know, if you're doing like a big flared out elephant foot style flatter or something like that. Is that what you're trying to achieve? You're trying to create an architectural thing where that foot kind of collapses and you wind up with these real kind of funky, almost like swollen feet form like this, which, you know, if you go and have a look at Paley's work, you know, you'll see a lot of these feet just giggling like crazy. I know it looks like a poop emoji, but you know, you look at even Albert Paley's work from back in the 80s and 90s, and yeah, 80s and 90s mostly. He did a lot of these big, heavy upsets on like 2-inch bar stock. He'll even put twists in them and octagonalize them, and gets these crazy upset swellings. Is that what you're trying to achieve? Or are you just trying to isolate a mass to make a head? So you might be trying to form a head for a decorative nail or something like that on the end of the bar, or just a decorative ball or something. So understanding where your final goal is important. Also, using your heat to the best of your ability is really important, because you don't want to be driving in like this when you're trying to do a more of a linear swell. If you get that big flare out, you're basically starting to waste energy movement. Push it in, control it. Having the knowledge of where you're trying to get to rather than just doing is important. You've got to envisage what you're trying to create. If you don't have a clear vision of what you're trying to do, and you are just having a wander, that's awesome. Have a wander in the wilderness. Just spend 40 years out there and learn all the things. But if you're trying to achieve a certain goal, drive towards that goal. So I'm going to go back into this piece that I was demonstrating on during the basic mechanics, and I'm going to drive it back further and just hopefully kind of catch some of those little details. Do your work at the top of the heat, control at the end of the heat. Don't control too late in the heat, otherwise you're not going to be able to move it through to the core. In the same as when you're, say, spreading or drawing down a taper, chase the mass. We're trying to chase the mass backwards into ourselves, where with a spreading or a taper, you're chasing the mass away from you, trying to push it to corners or whatever it might be. And I'm going to cool off that shaft again. Actually, I'm going to go for a vertical jump up on this one. I'm going to turn it sideways so you can see that fold, see that bend there. I've got to get that in order. Drive those corners just a little bit to stabilize it, because it's bending because the energy isn't transferring straight through. Control again. And this is a great time to get that point back in. So I'm going to come up nice and high. That was an awkward hammer blow. And you see that this is that beautiful cat butt that I was talking about. So because I was working a little bit on the cold end, I've got that lovely pucker in the end, which is going to cause me a little bit of a problem in the next part, because as soon as I start driving here on the tip to swell back here, first thing these points are going to do is flare outwards. Okay, so I'll probably take a light heat, just drive that, let you see that, control it, and then keep going. All of this is always keeping an eye on what you're actually achieving. Kind of a weird thing. Yeah, I see a lot of young smiths, or young as in how long they've been doing it. They're approaching the material very aggressively, and they kind of get in their head that the whole of this heat they're going to do X, and they do it. And then they get to the end of it and go, "Ooh, that didn't achieve the results that I wanted it to." Try and be aware as you're working along where things start to go awry. And this is really, it's more about you having the experience of errors to know when you start to see those things going awry. And that's okay. It's okay to let it kind of go a little bit sideways and go, "All right, that happen. Now how do I control it?" But as you get more and more experience, you get more and more efficient with your material movement. You can see that thing happening, wrangle it in real quick, and then keep going forwards. So going back to side work, you're controlling of your mass, especially with something like upsetting. It is important to keep it well controlled, but don't over control it to the point that you're basically undoing your own work. Right? So that's kind of, I've got Jess's face on the other side of this camera. I wish we had a split screen at this point. But that's a really important thing. A lot of the time I see folks controlling. They're trying to keep things so over constrained, where one group just let it go completely awry and then go, "How do I bring it back?" You got another group that are the OCD ones, but don't quite know why they're OCD or how to control their OCDness, who over control it and don't ever let it do. So on something like this, you've got to let it swell. So when you control those bends of warp, don't keep hammering it and hammering it and hammering it and bring it almost back to square bar stock. You know, the original parent material, because you've just undone your efforts. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to just pop that back in a little bit there. And I have not even quite got rid of that pucker. If you look here on the tip, the pucker is still vaguely there. Get rid of that little bit of flare.
Show us at the end of the heat. I can't really quite see it. It's too bright.
It kind of shows up, but you can see how this has popped out really quickly on the edges.
There we go. Yes, now I can
Right? So that's why you don't want that pucker in the end. You've got to drive through to the core, because just by doing that, it's swelled out right at the tip. So just going to come in. This is just preparing basically how I should have prepared it at the end of the last heat, but I didn't have enough heat in it. Got a little bend in that bar, may as well control that now. That's a little better, we'll see how it goes. I'll only take one more heat on this so I don't have to bore you guys to death with my rant. Basic angle for centering. This is kind of going back to the principle of when we're doing points. This is a fishtail. This is a point, right? The flare is going this way, so away from me like a fishtail would on its edges, or it's the reverse of a point going this way and turning towards me. So understanding that when I work my sides, I want to present the material at the angle that it is. So if it's flared like this, I want to present it like this, and then strike it at that angle. I don't want to be striking like this, that's just going to mash in the top or put nasty marks in it. You want to center that mass as geometrically correct as possible. And again, this is all just basic physics. If you are driving that material in and there is lack of lineation in the mass, it will shift to the weakest spot. And you can't do anything about it. This is the nature of plastic mediums. Also, here's a little thing. If you double the width, right, of an object, so you keep it the same breadth, but you double the width of it, you actually, I think it's quadruple its linear strength in that plane. So, you know, those are like interesting little things that if you start understanding how mechanics of materials work, you can actually really start understanding why your material does things. So like if you have a rather lumpy taper and you're going to scroll it and it goes kink, 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 and it kinks at those slightly thin spots because you've got a scalloped hammer blow, what do you expect? It's kind of the nature of what is going to happen with these materials. Uniformity helps create consistency. All right, cool off, final offset. And you could, if you wanted to, cool off a section and then reheat it. Notice my material is held to the angle, my hammer is at the angle. Let's offset this way for a bit. This is when you really wish you had an upsetting block on your anvil. It makes life so much easier. Or you have a little shorty anvil or a big steel plate on the ground. There we go. Got a pretty good swelling on that. Just out of intrigue, see what I got. Reckon close to 3/4. Yeah, just a give or take.